At the time of Bayh-Dole, there were over 1,200 inventions that were sitting in universities without tech transfer offices because the government was unable or uninterested in following up and commercializing. The government really doesn't commercialize private ideas. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
My understanding, it's not allowed. Only 5% of the inventions coming out of government-supported research were being commercialized. Senator Bob Dole and Birch Bayh said, let's see if we can find a better model where the goal is to bring ideas that come out of basic and applied research into the private and public sector so that more people can benefit from it. And now that was the basic motivation behind creating the Bayh-Dole Act in 1980. And it's gone from 0 tech transfer offices to over 1,000 in 40 plus years since then.
Mm-hmm.
And the number of inventions has gone into the hundreds of thousands.
Hey everyone, this is Ty with the medDesign podcast, where we hear compelling stories from medical innovators who are making an impact on healthcare. So we're about to talk to my dear friend, Dr. Jonathan Rosen. I've known him for easily 10 years when we first met at a Coulter College event. And so he's just somebody who we've connected and share a passion for innovation, education, and really just playing with new medical technologies and finding a better way to do it. Honestly, I've found it challenging to introduce someone who has just made such an impact to the field of biomedical engineering and education through his very accomplished career. So he's recently retired from the University of Virginia, where he pioneered the Master's in Biomedical Engineering program there. He's just had a tremendous impact on so many students over the years. And he just has such a warm and caring approach to how he does things, but at the same time also challenges people to get to a better performance. So while his time in industry, he successfully commercialized numerous medical technologies. I just learned that he had a whopping 35 SBIR grants completed in 2 years through one of his industry relationships, which is just mind-boggling to me personally. During this conversation, we cover a lot of topics. And the one that has been an interesting point of discussion has been around the technology transfer process for universities, what works and what doesn't. We talk about Bayh-Dole and the legislation there and some of the intent there. And so it was a very thoughtful conversation. We dig into a nuance of how do you bring technologies from the university to a commercial playing field. And so this was a really fun discussion, and I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. All right. Hello, Jonathan, and welcome to the medDesign podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited about being here. Thank you.
I'm so tickled that you decided to come and join me for this. And I just have a lot of admiration for your career as a teacher, as an innovator in the field of biomedical engineering. And one of the things we've been talking about is through your teaching career, you've worked with a lot of university tech transfer offices, medical centers working with innovative physicians, and you've also prepared engineering students as they've gone through their intellectual property they've created through your course to then go through their office. Could you maybe talk about some of that process and how you've approached, I guess, that overall exit from the university system out into industry with new intellectual property?
That's a great place to start, Ty, and I'm excited about sharing some of my experiences over the 28 years of my teaching career, which is pretty much the second half of my overall career in biomedical engineering and product development. The first half was related very closely to corporate development and the creation of new companies. And about 25 years ago, I decided it was really exciting to work with people that are being prepared to be innovators and how to learn how to develop new products rather than focusing on getting them to develop products during their academic education and training. And so two of our themes throughout the master's program, where we've had over 250 graduates, both at University of Virginia and Boston University, that are all out there in the private sector now, coming up with fantastic ideas, I'm sure. But the theme was very much not to develop products during your master's, but to learn how products are developed. And that includes regulatory sensitivity. It includes a careful awareness of validation and verification of the ideas that they come up with to show that they work, and also the commercialization process. But that part has really been de-emphasized because a year and a half is unlikely that they would come up with an idea, develop it, and actually prepare it for licensing. Although it's happened, but it's not the focus. So what we're doing now, or what we've been doing more recently, is inviting our students to spend 50 to 100 hours just watching what happens in the area of medicine that they're particularly interested in. And we've had wonderful opportunity to work with over 100 clinicians who have understood the value of an engineer looking at what they do as a clinician and understanding why it's being done that way and how it's being done that way, so that they can identify valuable contributions through focusing on improvement of patient care. In their training, in the program that I developed, we focus really carefully on emphasizing the value created towards patient care rather than the opportunity for accessing large markets.
So maybe and I know that wasn't the point of the course, and of course in an academic, educational environment, it really is about getting your first repetition in. And because I think being a good innovator means you've seen this process multiple times. It's very rare that lightning strikes the first time that you go through this process. You have to do multiple attempts, right?
That's
Before
right.
you finally get some wins into the marketplace. But for those handful of situations where your students have had lightning strike, then what was that process like? What happened after you capture lightning in a bottle?
It, by definition, had to be a partnership between biomedical engineering graduate student
Hmm.
and one or more clinicians that served as clinical advisors and mentors during that lightning process.
Hmm.
And it has happened a few times where we have agreements with the university because these are students that are paying tuition. And so the relationship within the university's policies have to be agreed to, that these master students would be treated as employees regarding the patent policy of the university. So we got that worked out first. And then each university that I've worked with requires an invention disclosure of anything that's created during that employment or during that academic period. Help them develop the patent disclosures, which basically describe the invention. And then the university transfer office had an obligation to pass or take it on.
Hmm.
So they would look at it usually from two perspectives. And I'm not speaking as an official tech transfer, but my impression is that the first question that the department needed to answer was, if we file a patent on this and go ahead and hire a patent attorney to develop it, what are the chances that it would be uh, released as an actual patent, be patentable? And the second one is, if it is patentable, what are the chances that patent would be of interest for a potential licensee of that technology? So, because there's a lot of cost involved in any of that process. Um, so within a few months of a disclosure, the students found out whether the university was interested in pursuing it. And if the university said, thanks, but no thanks, we're not interested, it's an add-on to an existing patent or some other reason, then the students had the opportunity to take possession of that technology and go forward on their own to start a company or to license it on their own, but at their own cost. If the university decided to go forward with it, and it has happened a few times, the potential for an invention was high enough that it was worth the significant cost on the part of the university to pursue it. And then that would be developed into a patentable technology. And what happens often is the student or the researcher chooses to create a new venture based on their own inventions. And so then they have to step aside from their academic role and take on the role of the licensee of their own technology. And the university policies are very clear about how that works and what role and what percentages would be available. And that's very different for each university. So there's no standard or official or legal process of how proceeds are divided to each university.
That brings up one topic, which is just conflict of interest.
Yeah, it sure does.
And a lot of that has to do with researchers, right, who are supposed to be like accurately representing the scientific merits of their experiments, but then also have a financial incentive if the experiment goes in a positive direction, right?
And also, along with that, is the opportunity to continue to do research on the same topic. Academic researcher using NIH or NSF money or other government money. At the same time, they've started a company where they've licensed the first patent. And then the company wants to also develop further on technologies and innovations based on those original ideas. It's really a joint sense of responsibility between the innovator and the technology transfer office. Set up reasonable and fair and equitable arrangements to specifically avoid that conflict.
Right.
So some universities say, if you want to start your own company, then you have to give up your academic rights to receive part of the benefit from that commercialization.
So that swings the pendulum one direction is probably too far.
That's right.
And then the other way the pendulum could swing
can be that individual separates themselves from the venture that they've created and are not the CEO or chief technology officer, but there's an arrangement where their future inventions on the same topic can be added to the original patent through follow-on licenses. In that case, at least technically, there's no conflict. They can do the research. Some researchers choose to leave that topic alone, and I'm going to now work on something completely different. And that would be another way to avoid potential conflict.
Okay. So conflict of interest is one issue. But then there's what the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, was that what I guess got this whole like Office of Tech Transfer like creation in the first place within universities? Is that a fair way to think about that? Did that provoke or inspire or start the tech transfer process?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you mind explaining that? Because I've been trying to learn about the Bayh-Dole recently.
Actually, significantly before 1980, under the Kennedy administration in the 60s and other administrations, there was an awareness and an effort to try to think about how to bring technologies and inventions and breakthrough science that's supported by the federal government back into the private sector so that more people could benefit from that invention. They didn't know how to do it exactly. And before 1980, the government owned all rights. Absolutely. The universities couldn't do anything with them.
Okay.
At the time of Bayh-Dole, there were over 1,200 inventions that were sitting in universities without tech transfer offices that were just sitting there because the government was unable or uninterested in following up and commercializing. The government really doesn't commercialize private ideas. That's not allowed.
Yeah.
My understanding, it's not allowed. Only 5% of the inventions coming out of government-supported research were being commercialized. Senator Bob Dole and Birch Bayh said, let's see if we can find a better model where the goal is to bring ideas that come out of basic and applied research into the private and public sector so that more people can benefit from it. And now that was the basic motivation behind creating the Bayh-Dole Act in 1980. And it's gone from zero tech transfer offices to over 1,000 in the years, 40 plus years since then.
Mhm.
And the number of inventions has gone into the hundreds of thousands that have been successfully managed through Bayh-Dole, and thousands of startup companies around the country and internationally have licensed technology from universities on that basis. So, by all reasonable measures, Bayh-Dole has had an incredibly strong impact on innovation, not just in the medical area that I'm focused on, but in all areas.
Mhm.
Um,
How does that compare, like for US university, like federally funded IP and then transfer? How does that compare to other countries?
it's innovative in some ways,
Hmm.
and it's restrictive in other ways.
Okay.
And so I can't give you a country by country comparison, so that the European Union has their own version of relationship between university research and private sector.
Hmm.
I'm not versed in the details of that. In the US, there are two parts of Bayh-Dole that are not often emphasized, but are having a greater and greater impact. One is that the Bayh-Dole specifically says, yes, we want to bring that out into the public sector through licensing, but we want you to do it as quickly as possible. We want it to be commercialized quickly and efficiently. And that's often a challenge for universities, even through licenses. Companies say, I like this and I want to license it, but you have to do more research before I'm ready to license it. And so sometimes it's 6 months and sometimes it's 6 years after the patent is issued before the quality of the innovation is ready to be commercialized. That often comes up against the requirement of Bayh-Dole to do it quickly and efficiently. If the government potentially has the opinion that you're taking too long and that somebody else could do it faster, they have the right to also license it to someone else, and that's referred to as marching rights. That's part of the original arrangement in the law, and it has never been used successfully. It's been attempted several times where a small company or a startup, even of the inventor, licenses it on an exclusive basis, but it takes them forever to get funding and develop their own research. And a large corporation that could do it in a few months says, I want to be able to license that also. So they petition the government to march in and require that an additional license be granted. Each time that's been requested, it's been turned down.
Hmm.
There have been between 6 and 12 attempts to encourage march-in. None of them have resulted in actual march-in rights. On the pharmaceutical side, it's much more relevant currently, and it's a very hot topic because march-in rights also could be used to control the price of pharmaceuticals after they're commercialized. They can say, you have exclusive right, but you can't have excessive profits based on government-supported research.
Hmm.
We're going to give that license non-exclusively to you and give it to other people to make a more competitive environment. A pharmaceutical response to that is that would have a negative impact on their incentives to be innovative and to support commercialization if they can't control exclusive rights to develop that and charge whatever price they're able to in the marketplace. So that's what's happening right now.
Hmm. There's what federal subsidies that then go into a new drug development, and to a certain degree, there's an enormous amount of cost associated with that. But then the entirety of society bears the reward to the pharmaceutical company that then is delivering the solution to the market.
And so there's an attempt to balance what's in the public's best interest, which would be the lowest prices possible for healthcare,
Right.
and what's in the best interest of corporations and the private sector who are required by their shareholders to maximize profits. When those two objectives are in conflict, which they are right at the moment, so in conflict, then it has a direct impact on what is funded at the university level. One of the requirements of Bayh-Dole is that not just one contributing patent, but all of the patents are based on federally funded research related to, let's say, a specific drug. There are only, of all the drugs that are out there, out of thousands, literally thousands of drugs, only 22 meet that requirement. And so those are the only ones that would be eligible for March-in. It's not something that could be used very broadly unless Bayh-Dole is revised and replaced with a different model.
Right.
So that may happen in future administrations. We don't know.
You could see if that gets enforced, it puts more of an incentive on the pharmaceutical companies to not accept federal funding for their R&D efforts, so that there's not a upper limit on, or a more balanced approach to what the upper level of profitability could be for what they develop.
And the starting point of all of that is how much government money is dedicated to science. NIH, NSF, and many other departments, if they're not supporting research at the university, Bayh-Dole is irrelevant. There would be no potential to use it. And when certain administrations have been very forward in encouraging and doubling or tripling commitments to NIH and other agencies, and the number of patents that came out of those peaks went up dramatically as well. It's a direct correlation. The more research that's supported, the more innovation that occurs. That's obvious, but true. On the other hand, if the government chooses to decrease its commitment to research and science and stops funding university research or significantly reduces it, then the question is who's going to take up the support instead of the government. The private sector would be obvious, but then basically universities are doing contract research instead of basic research. The possibility is that the universities themselves could use their endowments or other sources that are not government-based to support basic research at the university level. And maybe both will happen. There's no indication now that there's been any decrease in basic research because of Bayh-Dole, but it's because there's also been a tremendous amount of support behind it. As long as that stays true, I think the next thing that'll happen is there'll be a revision of the basic model behind Bayh-Dole to make it more currently relevant. In 1980, there wasn't even an internet yet. Everything like artificial intelligence and software in general has to be considered in a new light in terms of how that technology is made available to the public.
I'm curious if you had any advice for maybe either a medical innovator who, say, is working at a medical center within a university, or from a commercial startup who is looking to collaborate with a medical innovator to commercialize the outputs of their ideas. Any advice for how to navigate? We talked about of intellectual property to the tech transfer office, conflict of interest. What's the best way to, those are some tricky issues that can tank your initiative.
Absolutely.
And add a whole lot more friction to a process that already has a lot of friction.
It's asking me what advice I could give about minimizing your taxes. The first answer is talk to the IRS. And in this context, absolutely the best mechanism for creating a constructive collaboration within a university structure is to work very closely with your tech transfer office. And quality and expertise housed within technology transfer offices has also increased dramatically. Until about 10 years ago, tech transfer was mostly a cost. They would pay for things, but would hardly ever get anything licensed. And so it was considered by the university administrations mostly to be a service to their researchers. if you come up with something, yeah, we'll pay for a patent with very low expectations of any return to the university.
Okay.
Then there were a couple of vaccines and a couple of drugs that reduced to commercial applications that produced $100 million in lawyer royalties. And then the university said, wait a minute, maybe this isn't a lost cause. And if we had more of those successful licenses, we could actually not just pay for tech transfer, but actually make it a positive contributor to university funding. And so there's more of that happening now than there was, and they become more efficient at the process. Most universities also provide in-university training on what it means to get a license, to get a patent and how it's licensed. Also, how regulatory affairs impact that on the medical side. And I would encourage both physicians and engineers that are not already well versed to really use the opportunities provided by the university and outside to understand the process as well as they can. And I know Trig has worked very hard on the education side, and I totally applaud your efforts and others to make people understand what the process is and then work in a collaborative way rather than a confrontational way with their own universities.
Exactly. It doesn't do anybody any good to just set, I don't know, I guess just battle lines and start attacking each other, because that's not going to go anywhere constructive. It has to be something that, if everybody's adding value into this commercialization process and making sure that there's appropriate incentives for each party who adds value along the way.
And just a few months ago, I had the opportunity and took advantage of retiring from teaching after 28 years. Thank you, from the University of Virginia. And this is a good time to put in a small appreciation to the incredible efforts within University of Virginia to create working collaborations and create a collegial environment that encourages people to work together, to work across platforms, to solve problems that are introduced through the commercialization process successfully. And it has really been a great milestone in my teaching career to work with the biomedical engineering department at UVA and the tech transfer offices at the university.
You have just quite a legacy, and I've certainly enjoyed learning from you as you've invited me to come in and either be part of some of your education teaching and get to be a guest lecturer from time to time. So I've certainly appreciated our collaboration over the years.
Now, I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and my students can't wait for your visits to our classes.
Those are always a lot of fun, particularly if we can do skydiving T-Rexes and teaching dogs to play baseball and all kinds of fun exercises to get kids to open up their thinking a bit.
I hope that continues. We've had our collaboration for over 10 years now, and I hope we can find new adventures to work on together.
Absolutely. There's always more innovation to discover and to talk about and to try to educate and help there be more effective medical innovators out there to solve meaningful problems.
I'm excited about that. It's the most exciting time in the history of medicine where engineering gets to move from palliative care to therapeutic and preventive care through technologies that were never available before. And so the opportunities now for innovation and their impact directly on patient care is higher than it's ever been. So I encourage people to get into this field and come up with really great ideas because we need them.
Jonathan, is there a book you might have read that could be helpful for an aspiring medical innovator, aspiring biomedical engineer that has been helpful for you as you've either referenced or referred for somebody on that journey?
I would recommend two books. One that is really the most definitive description of the idea creation and development, prototyping and commercialization, which is the book that came out of the Stanford group called BioDesign, and it's been revised at least once, maybe twice now. It's the Bible, and it tells you exactly what's involved, and the work at Stanford remains one of the high points of what we can do nationally. So I would certainly recommend that as a basic reference. If you're interested in developing commercial models specifically, then any references related to creating a business model canvas, which is about 10-year-old idea, but you can put a whole design business plan on one page. And I have all my students do that to understand the connections between their idea and how to get it into the public sector. And so I would recommend that series of books. And finally, one of the ones that's had the biggest impact on me is Clay Christensen's approach as a deceased, but now honored as a legend at Harvard Business School, and his concept of people wanting to get jobs done rather than just being customers. And that's had a huge impact on my own commercialization. And if you had those 3 books in your library, you'd be off to a good start. And the last one is To Hire Trig.
That's not a book. I think to have a conversation with me, you get more book references than anything else. Very good. Jonathan, for people that are looking to reach out to you and connect with you, what's the best way for our listeners to find you?
They can write to me directly on my university email, which is still active. It's jrmg@virginia.edu. I'm pretty good at responding to them, so I'm happy to do that. The most active networking that I do is through LinkedIn, and you can reach me directly in my LinkedIn account. And if you invite me to connect and reference this podcast or anything else, then I'd be happy to accept your invitation. And then you would have access to my 4,000 first level contacts there.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to do that.
Wonderful. All right, Jonathan, it's always good to see you and talk with you. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
It's been a great pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for watching the medDesign podcast and this really fun conversation with Dr. Jonathan Rosen. Before you go, please make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. And do drop us a comment about what your favorite part of the episode was. If you'd like to see us interview other guests who are medical innovators, please reach out and I'd be happy to talk to them. All right. Thank you.